Welcome to the Ocean Studio. Here as part of the Yahowah blog, I'm here with the Wookiee, and we're going to continue so that we conclude our session in First Samuel about the identification of Dowd as God's chosen one for him to anoint as the Messiah and what he had to say about him. And then we're going to venture into Mykayah to continue to learn all we can about this very special man and Yahweh's relationship with him. It is a bit dicey here in the Caribbean. We've got some rain clouds that are moving in and out. Heavy rain last night filled up the cistern, so that's always a good thing. The plants are all celebrating. But we may have a rapid conclusion to the program. By way of an update, we will be doing a vlog on the blog on what's the next escalation in the Iranian war. It appears that Donald Trump is going to dispatch many thousands of special forces to take the islands in the Persian Gulf. And I want to talk to you about what I think the consequence of that is going to be as it plays out, most likely over this weekend, so that no one is surprised. Also, we've made a lot of progress on the Yahowah.com website. We have one malcontent that we're going to have to figure out what to do with, because with everyone using it well, we have a plant from that malcontent cult that is trying to abuse everything that I have so freely shared to be a contrarian. And so we're going to have to figure out how we preclude a gift that I am offering people to learn about Yahweh from being corrupted by the malignant among us. But other than that, things are quite well. We actually got up for a few minutes a community page. I thought it worked great, but our beloved web designer, Sir Joe, wasn't convinced that it was ready to put up for live use yet, even though I made probably 10, 12 posts on it and thought it was working just spectacularly, as creating the kind of community we were hoping for. And I suspect that he'll get it back up shortly and we can use it. But it has a couple of glitches and he wants to fix those before it goes live. But anyway, we're very close to having a community capability within the website. So very pleased to announce that. This particular line is one I wanted to share with you again so that we can conclude our review of First Samuel as Yahweh directed his judge, who became a prophet, Shamuel, which means he listens to God, to reach out to and retrieve the eighth son of a derelict man and a mother who was never known to her son. But we're speaking of Dowd and what God had to say about him first and foremost, before anything else, is earth-shattering for anyone who isn't aware of what I have already been able to deduce about how God deploys and redeploys certain souls to achieve his agenda. It says, so Shamuel, he listens to God, conveyed to Yishay. It means source of existence, although the man himself was a bum. Reach out and get him is the instruction. This is Dowd, the eighth son, the youngest, because we will not turn away. We will not change our approach until he arrives here. Boy, that's a message for all of us. We're going to stay the course. We're going to continue to do what we're doing. We will not be swayed otherwise. And we need to continue on this path until Dowd arrives right here. So he sent him, he sent a way for him. Of course, he didn't go get him himself. Too big an operator was Yishay to bother to do that. He just sent somebody else off to get his 8-year-old son who was tending sheep in Bethlehem. And it says, first of all, Wahu Adoni. Stunning. It's almost always rendered, and he was ruddy and red-headed, because Adon can mean that he was the same essentially word as we find as Adam, and therefore he was like the first man. And Adam, the description of man, and Adam, which is now used to describe the first man created in God's image, are synonymous in the Hebrew text. There is no difference between the way Ha Adam is written, meaning the man, or Adam. In fact, you have to take the definite article away to turn Adam into a name. It's always presented in that context of as Ha Adam, as the man. So it is descriptive of the first man that God created in his image, and that makes him special. It's the only person that God literally conceived with his own hands, no mother, no father, and that God blew the nefesh soul, his consciousness, into him, along with his nasama, which is his conscience, ability to discern right and wrong, to be able to reason and be judgmental. The one thing that made him in the image of God, this ability to exercise good judgment regarding the things that he was witnessing around him. And that makes Adam the firstborn of Yahowah in this regard. And so when Yahowah speaks of Dowd as his firstborn, there is, for those who know how to make reason connections between the things God says, a definite correlation between Dowd being God's Bakor, firstborn, and Adam being the first man, literally conceived by God, where God is the equivalent of the mother and father, and where he has breathed his soul right into him. And this says Adamoi, and it's Adamoi, Adamoin, then with a yod at the end of it. So Adam means Adam, or the man. So he is the man. He is Adam, with a own following it. The own in Hebrew permeates the language and is used to speak of all things pertaining to something. So, for example, a Shabbaton is all things pertaining to the Shabbat. Zacharon is all things pertaining to the most memorable of men. Excuse me there, Wookie. You're going to knock Whisper Man off the table, and everything's going to go crashing down. Thank you. There, you're repositioned right there on the table. Nicely done. And one of the most interesting words that God uses regarding Dowd is he calls him Elyon, which is all things pertaining to the influence of Almighty God. So the own following Adam here would be all things pertaining to Adam, which means he is saying he is Adam. And that he is not just Adam, he is everything pertaining to Adam, which means he would have Adam's conscience and Adam's consciousness, Adam's personality, Adam's attributes. He's Adam. That's the first thing he told us. Now, the only difference, the addition between Adam, Aleph, Deleth, Mem, which is how Adam is written, and then the On, which is the Wa Nun, which is the waters, the life-giving waters, and the Nun being a son or something that God is giving new life to. So Adam, with this own ending, conveying those concepts, is the last letter is a yod or a y. When a yod or a y is used in this kind of a context, it describes something that is my. It's from ani. And so it would be the all things pertaining to my Adam. That's who Dowd is. Now, once you recognize that, which is the point that I have been making, and I think if you're going to perceive the entire portrait that God is painting and understand his timeline, his players, the pace to which this story is unraveling, the places it takes place, it is essential to eventually come to embrace what I have been sharing here over this last month, maybe month and a half, where it's becoming overwhelmingly evident that God has a cast of characters that he uses over and over again. There are souls that he has come to trust, that he has deployed previously, that he knows he can count on to get this job done. And Dowd happens to be the first and foremost of those individuals. The captain of the cables is out here saying, I think we're still okay, but it could pour on us any moment. I'm drip dry, but we've got, I don't know, $20,000 worth of equipment out here that may not take the same view. Plus, our books don't much like water. I don't know if you've ever seen a paperback after it has been soaked, but it is not a pretty picture. So we'll try to protect the books first of all, and then things like the microphones and the teleprompter and the cameras and the lights and the computers and all of that sort of thing. So this is really a profound insight. The fact that God is confirming it this adroitly after we discovered it is just an indication of how genuinely good, kind, compassionate, caring he is regarding those doing his bidding. Every time we've come up with an insight that it strikes you, say, the only logical, rational, reasonable explanation of what we are considering here would indicate that this is a new conclusion, a new profoundly important insight. God then directs us to a series of passages that confirm it. The tail wag here is because Leah has come to the doorway, and I think she's retrieving Kara. And Wookie is you can see what Wookie thinks of Leah. So I'm thrilled with this. I'm very comfortable with everything that it represents and know it to be true. And I hope that it becomes more and more comfortable with the covenant family, that God has a series of people that he likes to use. And then it goes on after saying he is all things pertaining to my Adam. And it says that he is Yahowah, which means he's a very attractive individual. He has a cheerful attitude. He's has a bright disposition. And he said he's pleasing. In appearance, he's beautifully proportioned, desirable. Seeing him from God's point of view, at least, he's exceptionally pleasant. But now, imagine this, because I think it's important for you to know this. God will tell us that he sees individuals different than we do. He sees what matters, which is the soul. The body is irrelevant to him. The body should be irrelevant to us. It's all about the soul. I think part of the problem is what religion has done. Both Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all speak of bodily resurrection as if the body is going to be part of the eternal existence, and it's just utter rubbish. If you're in love with your body and you think that your body matters, then you're not part of the covenant. You're just not going to be part of this family going forward. You've got to recognize that all God sees in us is our nephesh soul. That's the only part of us that goes forward. It's the only part of us that can be released from three dimensions, be enveloped in light energy, and taken into the fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh dimension, exploring the universe and entering God's heavenly home. And so when he says that he was visually pleasing, what God is saying, the soul that I see, I like. That soul is beautifully proportioned. It's desirable. It's exceedingly pleasant. It's agreeable. It's delightful. Yahweh loves Dowd. All there is to it. And he said, of your own volition, now stand up. Take a stand regarding Dowd. You should want to anoint him as Messiah of our own free will. This should be our decision, that we recognize that Dowd is the Messiah. We should anoint him, give him that distinction. That distinction belongs to him. because indeed this is he, God said. So, Christianity created a religion based on a myth that Paul created and called him the Christ as if he were the Messiah. It happens to be a Greek term that speaks of the application of drugs. It was the closest Greek term that they could find, or that Paul chose anyway. It means, by the way, to be drugged. But to say that of a Iusu Christu is to spit in God's face. God said, you should want to anoint as Messiah Dowd, because indeed he's the one. This is he. And for the idiots that promote Christianity to say, oh no, it's Jesus, he's the Christ, you're telling me that God is a liar. And I'm not buying it. You shouldn't buy it. It's a fool's folly. It's annoying to God. Don't do that. And at this point, we're told that, so then Shamuel, he grasped hold of the horn. We talked about this in our last program from the Ocean Studio. The Quran is used routinely to direct our attention to Dowd. It was the Quran of Dowd as the Passover lamb that was found on Mount Moriah during the dress rehearsal for Pesach that Yahowah provided in place of the only and beloved firstborn son of Abraham, that being Ishak. Don't take your son's life, your only son whom you love, because Yahowah said, I will provide the lamb. And then the lamb was seen with its horns radiating and caught in the thicket on the top of Mount Moriah. Those horns always apply to Dowd. And it says that the horn was of olive oil and anoint him in the midst of his brothers. Dowd isn't to be anointed apart from Yisrael. He is to be anointed as part of Yisrael. You see, the kinsman redeemer is called a kinsman redeemer because guess what? He's kin. When Ruth told Boaz, I'm your Amma, I'm your productive mother, and I'm going to deliver the kinsman redeemer when she was in Bethlehem with him, she was talking about the fact that the Messiah and Redeemer, the Savior, is kin to Yisrael. That's why it says among his brothers. Now, being anointed is a symbolic action that says that God has designated this individual for a particular purpose. Now, the purpose with Dowd is extraordinary, and that's why God says later on in the 89th Mizmor that he used his own very special anointing oil to anoint Dowd. There is no one anywhere close to his stature as a messianic figure. He is the one. As God says, yes, this is he. Now, that's a outward symbol and an endorsement of this man's nephesh soul, one that will be deployed and already has been deployed many times and will be deployed again. But that's just the beginning. The bigger part of this is twofold. One is that the Ruwach of Yahowah, the spirit of Yahowah, came upon him. There's very few individuals or souls that Yahowah specifically says that the spirit of Yahowah came upon him. And Dowd is one of those individuals. The spirit of Yahowah also comes upon the choder. So this is an important designation, and it's the spirit of Yahowah that not only protects him and empowers him and enlightens him and enables him and enriches him. There's just so many things that the spirit does, and we know with Dowd, the spirit would never leave him, which means the spirit was with him during the suffering of Pesach and of Matzah, going through Bokodim. And this is not something that any individual can see, but when God says it's happened, you need to know it's happened. And that you don't want to ever go against someone whom Yah has bequeathed his Ruwach. That's an exceptional designation and enablement. The second thing I wanted to say is that When Yahweh chooses to prepare and present someone in an important role, he tells you all about it. There are more descriptions from God and prophecies from God regarding what he has done and will do with Dowd than any other person. His story goes back 6,000 years to the garden, and it is integrated into forevermore as he is king of Sukkah, returning on Kippurim. So God tells you when he is working with someone. That's why there is upwards of 1,000 prophecies on the lesser luminary, Dowd being the greater luminary, on the tree of knowledge, Dowd being the tree of lives, on everything that Dowd represents as the Messiah and as the Melech king, as the firstborn of God. God has upwards of 100 titles and designations for Dowd. And he did the same thing with Moshe. He told us exactly that same thing, that he had chosen Moshe for this task. That's why when Miriam said, "We too speak for God," God says, when I choose someone that I'm going to speak through, you know it and they know it because I've said so. That's why there are upwards of 1,000 titles and designations and prophetic accounts regarding the role of the Nakri and the Choder. This is the nature of what God is saying. Now, it's saying that the Spirit of Yahweh didn't come passively upon Dowd, but it came with tremendous power, succeeding such that he would prosper. He would be able to thrive. He would be endowed with the ability to prevail and become especially useful. It was a shalach, ek el Dowd. So it came upon Dowd, David. Well, there is no V in Hebrew. Certainly not at this time. It was contrived by the rabbis over 1,000 years after. In fact, that V sound was actually contrived by the rabbis in the 11th century CE, so 2,000 years after this. And the name is written Deleth wa Deleth. So it is definitely Dowd. But it says that Spirit of Yahweh came upon Dowd. Doesn't say it came upon Jesus. Doesn't say it came upon Hashem. Doesn't say it came upon a rabbi. Came upon Dowd. Got to deal with that. Dowd is the one that Yahweh says is the Messiah. The one that Yahweh chose. The one that goes all the way back in terms of his consciousness and conscience to Adam. So then Shamuel stood up, the job was done, and he walked to Ramah, which is a high place. Very clear indication of what God called him to do. Go and do this. So, and therefore the Spirit of Yahweh turned away from any association with Shaul. It isn't that the Spirit of Yahweh is limited to being on one person. Yahweh took the spirit of, he didn't say with the Spirit of Yahweh, but he said it was the Spirit, and divided it 70-fold to get additional help for Moshe when Moshe had his crash and burn. So God can allocate his spirit to more than one person. At this point, we only know of one person that has been given the Spirit of Yahweh, plus 6 other spirits associated with Yahweh, and that would be the Choder. But still at this moment, the Spirit of Yahweh would be around the soul of Dowd, would be around the soul of Moshe. So it is something that I think is continued with the people that God chooses, but you got to see it through. The people chose Shaul, Saul. Yahweh said, bad idea. They're rejecting me to choose him. But, free will and all, I gave them free will, which means I have to allow them to reject me. I have to allow them to have an alternative. And so, I'm going to endorse this to the extent that I can. I'm going to, rather than plague his kingship, I'm going to do what I can to enable it. It's going to turn out poorly, but I'm not going to be the reason that it turns out poorly, is what God's basically saying. So he anointed Shaul, and he placed his spirit on Shaul, and Shaul turned out to be an egomaniac, tried to augment and change the Torah. And God said, no, we're not going to have any of that. You're done. And he removed his spirit from Shaul. That's appropriate because you look at someone like Miriam again. Miriam was called a prophetess when she coordinated the women's response to the Song of the Sea. That wasn't much of a role, but nonetheless, God called her a prophetess while she was doing that. And then God struck her with leprosy, said that it's as if your father is spitting in your face. He ostracized her from the community, and then he used her in Verbatim as the best example of being divorced and therefore separated from God. So it is possible to go from being covenant to not being covenant. You can work yourself right out of the covenant relationship based upon you challenging God's intent. And Shaul did, and Shaul was. As a result, now this doesn't happen to everyone, but it certainly did happen to Shaul, and maybe it happened to Shaul because when the spirit of Yahowah left him, it left such a void that he was hungry for power. He was hungry for the way that felt in him, and therefore he was open to the spirit of Satan having Yahowah having turned on him and said, "No, I can't be part of this anymore. You've become malignant." So he allowed the spirit of Satan to infect him. I think this is what happened to Donald Trump. I think he's always been a despicable man. In fact, we know he's always been a despicable man. But sometime after losing the election cycle 5 years ago and being brought up on all manner of charges and losing every case and very quickly going bankrupt and headed to jail as a convicted felon and having the worst cases still pending against him, election fraud in Georgia and the document scheme, this having in Mar-a-Lago documents that were government documents that he was using for commercial purposes. These violations would have caused him to go to prison. And somewhere along the way, wanting to crawl back to power, wanting to get revenge on those he did not like, and trying to keep from going bankrupt, he definitely made himself available to and open to Satan. And now he is demon possessed. He is the Rahab. He is the corporeal manifestation of Satan. And it's really obvious, something that we have disclosed 17 months ago. And with every day since that time, he has proven that conclusion to be accurate. So in this case, as a result, an evil and malignant spirit overwhelmed and tormented him for being against Yahowah. For those who don't like the idea of me saying that Donald Trump is demon possessed because they don't like the idea of demons or Satan or whatever it may be, the testimony of Yahowah indicates that it is possible for someone to be overwhelmed and tormented, inundated and troubled, pained, if you will. That's what Ma'ath means, by an evil and malignant spirit. This is what it says. It's a ra'ah, harmful and inaccurate, perverted and ruinous, incorrect and immoral ruwach. So facts are facts. God's statement is clear. There are evil spirits. Shaul is an example of somebody that was infected with a tormenting spirit. His namesake, the example that he sets for us to understand Shaul, who became Paul, the author of the first 14 books of the Christian New Testament, he also admitted at the end of his second letter to the Corinthians of being demon possessed, having an evil spirit from Satan that controlled him. So this is something we have to be aware of and look out for. And we'd have to be blind to miss the connection. Both Shauls, the king and the wannabe apostle, were demon possessed. They were tormented by an evil spirit dispatched by Satan to control them. The wannabe apostle Paul called Satan's messenger a thorn in his side and was used to control his out of control ego. And interestingly enough, both malignancies are attributed to men who were committed to devaluing Dowd. All right, well, at this point, there are over 1,100 additional references to Dowd and the Torah and prophets, many of which are prophetic, even though his name was expressly excluded in each, or I should say included in each. Most have been misappropriated or denied. That's the nature of Christianity. They ignore what God actually said. They take a snippet out of context, misrepresent it, misconstrue it, misappropriate it, mistranslate it, and say, that's my guy. I got a prophecy right here about Jesus. No, it's a story about Dowd, a prophetic indication of who Dowd is and what he would accomplish. So even though his name was included in each of these prophecies regarding him, most have been either denied Dowd or misappropriated to Jesus. There are also many others which speak of the Messiah without naming him at all, which were written about Dowd, and only Dowd qualifies. One such example is found in Mykayah, Mykayh. It describes someone who will come from Bethlehem, which obviously Dowd did in this life, but the one we're talking about now, around 1000 BCE, but also in his fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim, 33 years before that time, he was born in Bethlehem again. So Christians claim it must be Jesus because the New Testament says Jesus was born in a manger in Bethlehem. All they're doing is Paul was claiming, and so were his cronies, that they know the Messiah was coming from Bethlehem. God said so in numerous places, so they just put their myth, their baby God, in Bethlehem. So, doesn't apply to Jesus. Was no Jesus. Anyway, this is what it says. Now at that time, at this point in the narration, and subject to this sequence of events, settlements, towns, and villages, apart from societal influence and unaffected by religion or politics, you should band together. A siege of rebels and raiders, of this confining onslaught of plundering marauders, are placed against us. With a rod and weapon of war, people associated by race or geography, this is Shabbat, it's an all-encompassing term. It can speak of subdivisions of people or of rulers, will choose to smite, afflict, and destroy the decision maker and the judge, the one who exercises good judgment of Yisrael on the jaw. Mykayah, who is like Yahowah, Mykayh 5:1. Well, interesting. It's saying here, just as the opening stanza. So now at this time, he's saying prophetically, there will be towns, settlements, and villages that are going to be used apart from anything that you would think would be appropriate, and that that they should stand aside from religious societal influences. They should be unaffected by religion or politics. But look what happened to Bethlehem. Look what happened to Nazareth. Look what happened to Jerusalem. All of these things got enveloped in religious myths and societal influences and the like. And so this is a prophetic warning and saying, don't let that happen. Now, it's towns and villages don't have a personality where they can make a choice, but the people in them, the people who write of them, the people who are should be protective of them, can. And it says, now at this time, keep these settlements, towns, and villages separate from these societal influences, keep them unaffected by religion and politics. And you should band together in this regard, because there is going to be a siege of rebels, so these raiders who will have an onslaught, and they will try to plunder these towns, and they will be against Israel. That's what Christianity did. That's what Islam has done. And so, with a rod and weapons of war, people associated by race, culture, and geography, both Christians and Muslims, will choose to smite, afflict, and destroy the decision maker and the judge of Yisrael, doing so on the jaw where one would speak. So there would be occasions where this would apply, both of which pertain to Dowd in actuality. The plundering raiders seeking to restrict and afflict Israelites, robbing them of their dignity, their land, their Messiah, and place as God's people, would be known as Romans, both the empire and the church. And that would place this attack adjacent to Dowd's arrival to fulfill the first three Mykayh in year 4000 Yah. Or these marauding militants could be today's Muslims hell-bent on ransacking Israel. If so, this would be addressing the days before Dowd's return in year 6000 Yah to fulfill the last two Moed. Either way, they are attacking Dowd, who is Israel's decision maker and judge, seeking to silence and incapacitate him. But there's also a decision maker that God has empowered that is speaking to the world at this time, warning them that to disparage Dowd and to attribute the lands that are associated with him and his kingdom with the religion of Christianity or Islam is a diabolical thing that is going to engender Yahweh's wrath, to the extent that all of you who do that, who opined for a Palestinian state and freeing Palestine, and for denying that Jews have the rights to the land of Yisrael, you're in serious trouble, because God's going to annihilate all of you before his return on Torah in year 6000 Yah, which is 2033, 7 years from now. And you, Bethlehem, it's house of Lechem, house of bread, or house of conflict. Lechem can be translated either way. Ephra, which means fruitful, branching off and bearing fruit, which, of course, Dowd would certainly do. Existing as the younger sibling among the thousands of Yehudah, from you to approach me, one shall come forth to be the one who writes proverbs and governs, Mashal, in Yisrael, whose beginnings is from antiquity, from ancient days. Well, who do you suppose we're talking about here? Whose came from Bethlehem? That would be Dowd in life, this particular life, the one we're talking about now, which is 1000 BCE, thereabouts. And then he was born again in Bethlehem to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim. And God is saying, now he's writing this in or about what 600-700 BCE, and saying that this person comes from great antiquity, from ancient days, from days very, very long ago, which would seem like an eternity of days. And this ancient days and from antiquity is repeated with men kedem, from long ago, because he existed a very long time in the past, and from ancient days, men yom alam, right back into antiquity. I know somebody that came from antiquity. In fact, the first man that was created with in God's image by God Himself, with both a conscience and a consciousness. His name, well, he was called the man. We know him as Adam. And Yahowah just told us that Dowd was Adam, all things pertaining to Adam. So they say, when one of the wonderful parts about doing this job is that the more you learn, the more you understand. The more you understand, the more you're able to learn. And you get to a point where learning occurs at such a tremendous pace, and that the insights become so just so much like a fire hose of new information, and that what would have taken 6 years to learn at the beginning can be processed and developed in 6 months, and what took 6 months to learn years ago can be outdone in 6 days today. That's where we are. It's exponential growth. And here, because of the 31st Mashal and all of the things pertaining to it, we came to recognize that Yahowah has favorite souls, and that He has deployed them right from the beginning with Adam and running all the way through the process until Dowd's return in year 6,000 Yah. All the way through the process, the key characters are reused. Not all of them. Some of them are ones and dones. But when God needs something accomplished and He has to rely on a person doing it, He chooses souls that He knows, that He's trust, that He's had prior experience with. And now He is telling you that this person who has come from Bethlehem and who will come from Bethlehem is from ancient days, from antiquity. And from God's point of view, antiquity begins in the garden when He created Adam. And so these insights about God taking certain souls, and Dowd is first and foremost among them. Chinook is the next, who is plays out 8 times in God's story, all the way to today and throughout tomorrow. That these souls come from antiquity. There is even the possibility that when God spoke of Elohim in the plural use of the word, which typically is just means that God's being inclusive. It's the royal we. It's how a humble person would talk when they're doing something magnificent. We did this. We all use that when we're talking about something that is so outstanding as to make what we're saying seem a bit egotistical. We'll throw in what's called the royal we. And so maybe nothing more than that, but it could be more than that. And so when God says that this soul came from ancient antiquity, could be very much that when God put the soul into Adam, the first man, that He already knew him. Wasn't the beginning of the relationship. There's no point where God goes to Adam and say, okay, hi, man, I'm God. God, man, God. Let's do we do a handshake. I don't know what we do in these cases, but let's go beyond simple introductions. Planet Earth, you're in a garden in planet Earth. Let me tell you where you are and what we're going to do here, and how this is going to work out. And oh, by the way, this won't be our only time together, but I'm going to lay it all out for you, and we'll take it from here and see how it works out. No, not how the story goes, is it? Not at all. Well, we go from Adam being created to God saying, lots of trees here. Eat from any trees you want. Just know that tree and the middle of the garden, that tree of knowledge, eat from that tree, and well, you're going to experience death, and there's some consequences there. So do what you want, again, free will and all, but avoid that. You think that's their first conversation? It didn't begin by saying what are these things, and what are the eyes, and what are we what are these walls here for? Who are those cherub that are on the walls? You're obviously more than you're manifesting yourself when you're communicating to me here. You're a lot bigger than that. If you created this whole thing, what's beyond those walls? What's the story with animals? Why are the trees having fruit? You know, there's got to be a gazillion questions that you would have, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So do you think it began with that? No. So very possible. So I'm on record as saying I am absolutely convinced that this and the previous statement that I read demonstrates conclusively that Adam is Dowd. Dowd is Adam. And that not only is Dowd Adam, there was another insertion of Dowd's soul between the time of Adam and the time of the Dowd as the 8-year-old boy from Bethlehem, whom obviously God knew really, really well. And it wasn't because he bonded with an 8-year-old out there tending sheep. So I have in the book that I'm writing now delineated all 6 of Dowd's existences, but I'm also fairly convinced that Noach, eldest son, Shem, was Dowd's soul, and that the next, of course, is the Dowd that we come to know. But there's also the very real possibility that and I think likelihood that the my Dowd and the El Dowd during Moshe's meltdown, that God said, "Hey, listen, I understand, Moshe, you're having a tough time with this. You want out, and I've got a couple of guys that I'm inspiring, and I'll take it from here. You just get them to the promised land. We'll take it from there." It appears to me that then, and I've also written this in this book as well, Coming Home 4, that there are some 15, 20 clues that suggest that Dowd and his pal, my Dowd, were also in the periphery around Moshe to keep the top from spinning out of control, because Moshe needed supervision. He needed a backdrop. He needed someone to protect him, sometimes even from himself. So that would make the Dowd of Bethlehem as the 8-year-old shepherd the 4th iteration of Dowd, and I think that's really quite likely. And the 5th would be when he was born in Bethlehem in 2 BCE on Sukkah for the purpose of fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim in year 4000 Yah. That'd be the 5th, and the 6th iteration of Dowd will be when he returns as king with Yahowah on Kippurim in year 2033. Now, again, if you want to disagree with some of this, feel free. Do so respectfully, because God's all in with this story. I have done an enormous amount of collaboration, and the insight was given to me by Yah, and has now been proven time and again by Yah. So my hope for you was that you would be accepting of this insight and have an appreciation that this is the way, and in fact, it is the only way that God could keep his story and his plans apace, so that they would play out when and with whom he intended, and how he needed for this whole story to materialize with his return in 6,000 Yah 2033. It stays on pace. The most important events are fulfilled. The key players deliver, all because of this plan with Yahowah. And so Mykayh, who is like Yah, 5:2, affirms that very thing. And you, Bethlehem, house of grain and home of conflict, Ephraim, You're fruitful, branching off and bearing fruit. You exist as the younger sibling among the thousands of Yahowah. From you to approach me, one shall come forth to be the one who writes proverbs and who governs, who conveys wisdom with word pictures in Yisrael, whose beginning was from antiquity, from a very long time ago, because he existed in the distant past, from ancient days. So, as an interesting insight, of course, Dowd was the youngest sibling at that particular birth. I don't know if he was the firstborn or the fourthborn in 2 BCE. He could have had older brothers of Jacob, Shimon, and Yahuchanan. But it doesn't really matter if there's brothers who were cast by Paul as disciples, whether they were older or younger than Dowd at that time, probably doesn't make a lot of difference. So I don't know if God's going to follow the exact same script in this regard. It just says that Ruth, speaking to Boaz, who was instrumental enough in the whole story, that one of the two columns of the temple is named after Boaz. It means with strength. That she said to him, I am your Amma. And we know that the Amma is the one who delivers Dowd. And she says, I will deliver the kinsman redeemer to you. And when we trace all of the prophecies regarding what happened and where it happened, that it's obvious that they gave birth to Dowd in 2 BCE on Sukkah. I don't know if he was the youngest at that time, but this God could have stayed the same way and had him be the youngest and his older brothers look after him. Would have been just fine as it relates to the story. So we have Dowd being born in Bethlehem, both of these two occasions, as well as him being conceived in the garden 6,000 years ago. And there is one proverb that I think that Dowd wrote. I don't know how many of them he wrote. There's 30 of them that are ascribed to Ethan Ha-Izraki, and there are 31 all total. One is ascribed to Solomon. So is it possible that we're missing one of them, or one or two were combined, or one was split into two? I mean, possibilities, or one was, or two were combined into one. Certainly a possibility in that regard too. But I think that the 14th, which is about the Choder, was likely written by Dowd. And we have the one written by Solomon, and then the rest were written by Ethan Ha-Izraki. So Dowd's extraordinary in this regard. He is the ultimate leader of God's people. So Mykayah, Mykayh, wrote between 735 and 700 BCE. I don't know if we have him on the timeline, but if we don't, we should add him. I know how to do that now. We have an admin to do that. But between 735 and 700 BCE, about 300 years after the event that we're talking about, or have been talking about, which is the first anointing of Dowd in and around Bethlehem by Shamuel and Yahowah. So the departure from Bethlehem probably took place with in that particular meeting in First Samuel around 1034 BCE. Now, is that considered ancient times, long time ago? 15 generations? No. So he's looking all the way back to the time of Adam, all the way back to the beginning. So now for an unexpected wrinkle in the framework of time, among the Qumran collections, there was a commentary written on behalf of the sect's righteous teacher, which was based upon Mykayah, Mykayh, and making his argument against the Pharisees. The Essene wrote, "One shall not come forth to be the one who writes proverbs and governs in Yisrael." So it says, one shall not come forth, lo yatza, to be the one who writes proverbs and governs in Yisrael. If his question was accurate, then Yahowah was bemoaning the fact that after Dowd, there would be no one to lead his people. And in context, there are also a few variations between the Essene citations and the Masoretic text throughout the rest of the book. This negation is still worth noting. Returning to Mykayah's prophetic presentation, this next statement speaks of Yisrael having been released such that they would no longer influence others, and then of her beginning to bud and grow again after a long intermission. Therefore, we should be anticipating God's family returning as the covenant is reaffirmed following a painful and traumatic estrangement. Here's what it says. Therefore, he shall give them to another until such time as she begins to bud and grow, conceiving and giving birth, Yalad, Yalada. She becomes pregnant, experiences birth pangs, and bears offspring with feminine characteristics, begetting a daughter in travail. Then the remnant of his brothers shall change as they return, and they are restored as the children of Yisrael. Micah 5:3. So the story here is there's a daughter of Yisrael. She's the Amma. And that there is a time when, after Israel has been given over to the control of another, God has divorced Israel back in the time of Hoshea, 750-ish BCE. Then there is a time now where Yisrael is able to grow and conceive and bud again, as we're looking at the germination of the covenant family of this Amma and her Baal husband, able to conceive this covenant family, giving them birth. And so God's saying, yeah, I gave up on Israel. I pulled away. I divorced Israel. And so she was controlled by all manner of nations. But now she's ready to bud and grow again. She's ready to conceive and give birth. And that ultimate family comes in not so much by the few that are part of the covenant, but by the many who will be part of the remnant. This is the remainder that is left. That remnant that exists and is also brought into Jerusalem on to Ruwach in 2033, year 6,000, yeah. And that remnant will be of his brothers, of Dowd's brothers. And the thing that will make them different and them receptive to being productive again is they will shub. You know, it's shub for shub or no shub for you. They will finally shub. They're finally in a position to return. They're going to change and return to God, and so that they're in a position for God to return to them. Then the remnant of his brothers, this is in 2033, shall change, and they will return, and they will be restored as the children of Yisrael, of those who engage and endure with God. I think that's a lovely place for us to conclude this particular episode of the Yahowah vlog here in the Ocean Studio. We've covered a lot of material already. We'll return to this hopefully tomorrow. We have a vlog on the vlog later today. I would dearly love to get in the first episode of basics on Shamuw'el, because we have a lot of material to make our way through until I reveal to you one of the most interesting prophecies that Well, we have stumbled upon, at least this week, about the timing of Shamuw'el and those who are included and those who are counter to its purpose. And we'll get there. So long as the voice holds out and the king of the cables is able to keep us online, the rain doesn't fall, the Wookiee hangs with me. Looking forward to our next program. We'll be here with you shortly. Good day.
Hey there, thanks for tuning in. That was Fetch. Gotta run now. Catch y'all on our next podcast.